Yes, Mother? My mother is talking to me about Miss Marple, so I was distracted. Hello, and welcome back to Reading in the Dark. My name is Byron, and I read sometimes. It is 2026, as you know. At the time that I'm filming this, it is the 3rd, I believe. Yeah, it's the 3rd of January. I was going to say July, but we haven't quite gotten there yet. It is the 3rd of January, and there's nothing more Floridian, I don't think, than all of our Christmas lights on our house still and a downpour of rain happening. I'm very proud of our weather-sealed, like, connector things that we used where all of the light strands plug together because they seem to be doing the trick so far, which is amazing. Yeah, so here is a glass of Prosecco that was in a bottle that was sitting open in our fridge that may or may not be any good anymore, but there are some bubbles left. It is nice and frosty, but yeah, so here's to 2020. Well, I guess we could say bid adieu and thank you to 2025. It was an interesting year. Happy New Year and hello to 2026. May it be an amazing year full of great joy and good times with people you love and also wonderful reading. Cheers. Well, I drank this and it went down the wrong thing. That could have gone better. So that's how this video is going. Okay. Oh, my eyes are gonna be so red now. Welcome to 2026. This video is gonna be my wrap up and my top 10 of my reading in 2025. Also a little bit of an update to bring y'all up to speed. When is the last time I actually was new, current time Byron on this channel? 3 months ago when I did a September wrap up. Yeah, so since that time, some things have happened. I had this whole schedule of videos planned, as you know, all these old videos that I was finishing, and I got a lot of them done. And then the schedule suddenly died, and then there was like a month with no video, and the reason is that I have been ill. I actually suffered a concussion at the end of October getting into my car. Yes, I guess my car has a lower roof than I thought it did, and I was in a hurry to get to work. I was running late, and I was like ducking down to get into my car. I did not duck enough and hit the back of my head right here. A few days later, I had a big bruise back there, and then when the bruise went away, I started getting dizzy, and the dizziness never went away. I went to see several doctors because I was missing work, and I needed like a doctor's note, and I had like a CT scan, and they didn't find any abnormalities, so like my brain is physically okay. It's not a serious thing. However, they do believe I had a concussion. So I have post-concussion syndrome or persistent post-concussive syndrome or something like that, which is supposed to last at least 3 months. And what it means is I am a little sensitive to light, which I kind of always am, to be honest with you, because I am a vampire. And also that I am prone to being dizzy. Basically, my vestibular system, the part of my brain that like helps you with your equilibrium, is like malfunctioning right now, and I'm having to retrain my brain. So I go to physical therapy twice a week. And one of the other things they tell you when you have this situation is to try to limit screen time. And sitting in front of my computer and editing was like a no-go. I could not do it. I couldn't go to work, so I was sitting around and I thought, well, great, I can get editing done. And I like could not stand to sit at the computer and stare at a screen. It made me dizzy, it hurt, my eyes were getting tired, it was weird. So that's why I fell behind on all the videos. So now I'm kind of back. So that's what's going on with me, and I wanted to talk a little bit about my reading in 2025. 2025 was a pretty good year for my reading, actually. I read a lot of horror and a lot of mystery, did a lot of good audio booking. I feel pretty good about it. In 2025, I read 26 books. I finished the last book on December 31st, like under the wire, came in under the wire with my reading challenge on Goodreads. And the last book I finished was, wait for it, the Dracula Book of Great Vampire Stories. I actually read it. Finally. I've been talking about that book for like 7 years. I finally read it, and the fact that it was the last book I finished in 2025 feels so incredibly appropriate. But yeah, so I finished the 26 books, some of them very long. It was 6,352 pages that I read with my eyes, and 104.5 hours of audiobook. That's a lot of driving to and from work. And the 104 hours of audiobook equates to around 3,460 pages. So overall, if you count the audiobooks, it's like I read 9,812 pages. But with my eyes, I read 6,352, and that's a bunch of numbers for you, for those of you who enjoy numbers. 11 of those books were horror, but that counts We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, which is gothic, but I don't know if I really think of it as horror. I don't think there's anything really supernatural in that book. That's a fascinating character study, and we'll talk about it later. But anyway, 11 horror books includes that. 3 thrillers, 10 cozy mysteries, and 2 works of literary fiction. So those are the stats for you, for those of you who enjoy stats. So I'm gonna go through a top 10 list. There are 4-star reads and 5-star reads on this list. And I think there's a couple of honorable mentions, but I'm gonna move over to make room for the book covers because they're gonna come materializing in on that side of the screen. So yeah, my number 10 is Model Home by Rivers Solomon. This book is polarizing. Some people did not love it. Some people really did not like it. I read it in August and gave it 4 stars. Rivers Solomon also wrote An Unkindness of Ghosts, which I have not read, but has been on my radar for a long time. And Sorrowland, which I did read and loved, which is why I was interested in reading more of their work. The 3 Maxwell siblings keep their distance from the lily-white gated enclave outside Dallas where they grew up. When their family moved there, they were the only black family in the neighborhood. The neighbors acted nice enough, but right away bad things, scary things, the strange and the unexplainable, began to happen in their house. Maybe it was some cosmic trial, a demonic rite of passage into the upper middle class. Whatever it was, the Maxwells, steered by their formidable mother, stayed put, unwilling to abandon their home, terrors and trauma be damned. As adults, the siblings could finally get away from the horrors of home, leaving their parents all alone in the house. But when news of their parents' death arrives, Esri is forced to return to Texas with their sisters, Eve and Emmanuel, to reckon with their family's past and present, and to find out what happened while they were away. It was not a natural death for their parents, but was it supernatural? So yeah, so it's sort of like the bickering dynamic between siblings in the aftermath, in the wake, if you will, of their parents' death. And they both died at the same time. All of them have a complicated relationship with that house. They all know that weird things happened there. Some of them are more straightforward about like, yeah, it's haunted than others. There's the really logical one who doesn't really want to admit that they believe it's haunted, and then the ones that are much more woo-woo about it. It was turbulent. The relationship between the siblings is turbulent, and I like that because I feel like this is a very fraught time for any family, and those like bickering and arguments do happen when all of that emotion is involved. There's great trans representation and non-binary representation in this novel. It's really nice to see. I love Esri's relationship with their daughter. And I love the trope of normally sane and responsible people kind of spiraling into self-destructive and irresponsible behavior. I'm not sure why that is, but I guess I do. I mean, people don't really share their messy side, you know, when you meet them and chat over coffee. Like awkward hookups, or, you know, a time that they did not prioritize their child and then woke up the next day regretting it. Stuff that's like awkward and embarrassing. People don't share that stuff, and when you get to see it, it's very illuminating. So I enjoy that trope, and I've learned that I enjoy that trope. I enjoyed that trope in Bathhouse. There's something unifying in that negative potential that we all have to take the wrong turn, make the wrong choice. I liked the ending of the book. The ending of this book, I think, is maybe not great for some people. You'll either probably love it or hate it. I really, really enjoyed it. So I think it's polarizing, but it's an ending that is very outside of the box, which is what I would expect from Rivers Solomon. I loved this book. I had a really great time with it, and I have very vivid memories of the story. Sometimes I read a book and I think I liked it, but I can't really remember it, and I can remember my mind's eye, the house, the people, the settings, some of the scenes that happened. And I had a great time. So this had to be on the list, and that's number 10, Model Home by Rivers Solomon. And now the battery is already dying, so hold please. All right, moving right along to number 9, The Fireman by Joe Hill. I listened to this as an audiobook. It was read by Kate Mulgrew, who was one of my favorite narrators of all time, in September, and gave this 4 stars. It was epic, and it felt like it wanted to be 5 stars, but I don't know, it just didn't do that something extra that puts it over the top and makes me feel some kind of way about it that I need to feel in order to give something 5 stars. So I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. It was very, very good. A terrifying new plague is spreading like wildfire across the country, striking cities one by one. The doctors call it Draco Incendia Trichophyton. To everyone else, it's dragon scale, a highly contagious, deadly spore that marks its hosts with beautiful black and gold marks across their bodies before causing them to burst into flames. Millions are infected, etc., etc. This is a post-apocalyptic novel of society breaking down and tribalism happening, the population of the world being decimated by this really interesting plague. And that's one of the things I loved about this novel was I thought the mechanism of the dragon scale was really clever, and it made more and more sense as the novel went on. It definitely referenced a painful and recognizable thing in the phenomenon of people who have, had enough and won't listen to science, which, this was written in 2016, so it was prescient in that way, coming before the pandemic. And it contained other really frustrating, in a good way, tropes of people behaving in frustrating ways in dystopian fiction, like a community that is orbiting around this one very charismatic leader who then take their devotion to them too far and they become overzealous, and then the leader kind of loses control of the group. And, there's a lot of survivalism and different bands of people and information that you hear that is gossip and, misinformation and disinformation and all this. Basically, the world is like anybody who has this virus has to be killed. And there are lots of instances of people who have the virus being carted off to be taken to some special hospital, but they're never heard from again, that kind of thing. And the science says, hey, maybe we should continue studying this, and we can save these people's lives if we understand the virus better, but people are so afraid. They don't want to know more about the virus. They just want to have guns and lock themselves away and keep people out of their front yard. There's a crazy, zealous guy who has taken over this one radio station and is broadcasting and is like really helping to inflame, pardon the pun, and kind of polarize people on the topic. So it's a lot of familiar dystopian tropes, but they're all written well. One thing that was challenging about this novel that I think is just inherent to epic fiction like this that takes place over the course of many years is that because of that, the main character goes through several eras where they're in this setting with these people, and then some big event happens, and then they're in this setting with these people. And so it's a little jarring when you become comfortable with the characters that you're with and the setting that you're in to then adjust and say, oh, the whole landscape has changed. This happened a lot in The Passage by Justin Cronin. This happened in The Stand. And it's just something that there's no way around it, but there were one or two times that I was like, oh, I miss being in that other setting. So it's not necessarily a critique, but it did challenge me a couple of times. But I loved the story. I loved the characters. Joe Hill can write a group of characters that the dynamic of them playing off each other is so great, better than maybe any other author that I have read. I loved the ending to this. One character in particular had an amazing arc and role to play in the story that I thought was fantastic. And I had a great time with this one. And that was number 9? Yeah, number 9, The Fireman by Joe Hill. Number 8 is a classic, a gothic literary classic that I mentioned before, We Have Always Lived in the Castle by the one and only Shirley Jackson, who also wrote, of course, The Haunting of Hill House, and a novella or a short story called The Lottery that I haven't read and I really want to read. But yeah, this was written in 1962. I read this in September as well and gave it 4 stars. Shirley Jackson's masterpiece, it says. Living in the Blackwood family home with only her sister Constance and her uncle Julian for company, Maricat just wants to preserve their delicate way of life. But ever since Constance was acquitted of murdering the rest of the family, the world isn't leaving the Blackwoods alone, and when cousin Charles arrives, armed with overtures of friendship and a desperate need to get into the safe, Maricat must do everything in her power to protect the remaining family. So this is a very gothic literary character study of Maricat. It is a very, very, very small insular family unit of these 2 sisters living in the home that they used to live in with their parents and living with their sort of aging Uncle Julian who has dementia. That's their stasis, that they live there. The people in the village and the town below are untrusting of them. They all believe that her sister did it. They think of them very negatively because they're a very wealthy family living in this big family, or at least they used to be a wealthy family living in this huge castle, and they're all struggling day to day, and so they resent the family and they just assume the worst of them. And once a week Maricat goes into town to do the shopping. She's very, very meticulous about, on this day I do this and on this day I do this, and then she goes into town and people snicker at her and she's aware of it, but she just sort of tries to ignore them. And she's grown up to believe that basically normal people are not to be trusted and don't matter, because she can always just get back into their house where there's gates that they can close and lock and then be safe there. She has this very ordered, self-imposed, structured life that she's created for herself, and this whole magic system, essentially. If she wants someone to stay away, she'll take an item that they left behind that belonged to them, and a feather I don't know, and like bury them near each other, and it like means something symbolic to her, and she thinks, well, now we're safe and they won't come back. Which is not true, but it's a nice notion. It's a fascinating little world that she lives in. She's not totally well. I mean, her growth has been stunted as a young woman. She still has the mentality, a very childish way of looking at the world, but it's beautiful in its own way. And at one point, a cousin shows up and throws all of that stasis into chaos, and the town becomes involved, and it's like this beautiful little world becomes sort of broken into a million pieces. But it's the relationship between her and her sister and their relationship with this little life they've carved out for themselves that is fascinating to read. It does sort of feel like the origin story to like the crazy cat lady up on the hill. But also, what's interesting is that while Maricat's inner logic and magic system, which I'm going to call it, is nonsensical and wild, Shirley Jackson also depicts the people in the village, the so-called normal people, as rather hysterical and prone to violence, quick to violence. And it sort of asks the question of like, which of these two groups is more sane? Which of these two groups is more untamed? I mean, they're all kind of wild in their own way. And it's really easy to side with Maricat. Plus, although her justification for things does not always make concrete sense, she has a really good sense about people. She has a really good instinct about people. And her immediate distrust of Charles is very telling of that. Maricat is just an iconic character. I sort of yearned for a more definitive ending, because the ending of the story is rather ambiguous, and actually, on thinking about it later on, I realized that, of course, that ambiguous ending is totally appropriate because it sort of sets them up as like an urban legend. The book really stayed with me. I'd been hearing about it for a long time. It's very different from The Haunting of Hill House, which is one of my favorite horror novels, but it's equally great, I think, and it's definitely stuck around in my head. So that was a 4-star read for me, and that was number 8. Yay, we're like not quite halfway through. Number 7 on my list, and the last 4-star read on my list, is The Between by Tananarive Due. This was written in 1995. I finished this recently in early November, gave it 4 stars. When Hilton was a boy, his grandmother sacrificed her life to save him from drowning. 30 years later, he begins to suspect that he was never meant to survive that accident, and that dark forces are working to rectify that mistake. When Hilton's wife, the only elected African-American judge in Dade County, Florida, begins to receive racist hate mail from a man she once prosecuted, Hilton becomes obsessed with protecting his family. The demons lurking outside are matched by his internal terrors, macabre nightmares more intense and disturbing than any he has ever experienced. Are these bizarre dreams the dark imaginings of a man losing his hold on sanity, or are they harbingers of terrible events to come? As Hilton battles both the sociopath threatening to destroy his family and the even more terrifying enemy stalking his sleep, the line between reality and fantasy dissolves. The Between. I love Tananarive Due. Ever since I read The Good House in 2024, I've wanted to read more Tananarive Due, so I read this with high hopes, and she did not disappoint. I think it's a smaller story than The Good House, but it's really, really interesting. It's sort of like a thriller and a supernatural horror novel kind of mashed up. You kind of go back and forth. Whenever Hilton is asleep, he has experiences with what seem to be supernatural, larger than physical life on Earth entities and powers and energies. And then when he's awake, he's dealing with the terrifying prospect of this crazed person who is making, threats against his family. It's really, really interesting. I really, really enjoyed this one, and I loved it almost as much as I loved The Good House, which was a 5-star read. It just doesn't have... I really liked the flashbacks to Hilton's childhood, to some really chilling episodes with his grandmother early on, and his memories coming back to him of the day that he almost drowned, and then just the going back and forth between the thriller and the horror, and then the kind of converging towards the end. It was really, really effective. I've not read a book like that before. I think I loved The Good House more because it had more like ancient history involved, but Tananarive Due. She's probably always going to be on this list. Tananarive Due is the greatest. In fact, I love Tananarive Due so much that I bought a short story collection of hers called Ghost Summer Stories. And it is 332 pages long, so it's got 15 stories in it. I bought it right after I finished the between when I realized this is a new favorite author. So, and that is the last 4-star read on this list. That was number 7. Yeah, so now we're going on to the 5-star reads. Here's to the 5-star reads, okay? Number 6 was Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, which was from 1956. And I read it in March, late March. It was an audiobook narrated by Dan Butler. There's also a version narrated by Matt Bomer, who was great. I don't think it was out yet, or I didn't know about it when I listened to this. So I listened to Giovanni's Room narrated by Dan Butler, and I loved it, and I gave it 5 stars. The fact that this book was written in 1956 is insane. This is gay. This is a queer story, a very sad story. I don't know why I'm laughing. I cried a lot during this story. It is so sad. Set in the 1950s Paris of American expatriates, liaisons, and violence, a young man finds him... Why did I say liaisons? A young man finds himself caught between desire and conventional morality. With the sharp, probing imagination, James Baldwin's now classic narrative delves into the mystery of loving and creates a moving, highly controversial story of death and passion that reveals the unspoken complexities of the human heart. So... this one ripped me up. This man who he's closeted, gay, or possibly bisexual, has a beautiful conventional fiancée who is away they're apart for several months while he's in Paris. Falls in love. He has an affair with and falls in love with this sort of like idealized, beautiful. In his mind, it's almost like he's like this idealized cherubic figure. He's beautiful, gentle younger man named Giovanni. Intellectual fireworks happen between them. They have very spirited arguments about America, discussing race and politics and class and money. And the protagonist, whose name is David, he just can't or won't give up his privilege, his conventional, traditional marriage to be and life that he's looking forward to starting. And of course he's worried about his father and stuff. He never says that he's gay. There are some very, very out and flamboyant queer characters at this bar where Giovanni works that are a foil to keep David as closeted and afraid of coming out as possible because they're so flamboyant and effeminate and the opposite of what he wants to portray. Oh, the whole thing is just so familiar. The idea of him loving this man and trying to reconcile that with, well, do I have to be a certain kind of person? Do I have to behave a certain kind of way? Do I have to live a certain kind of life in order to love another man? And it's the 1950s. It is tragic and sad, beautifully written. I wrote sad in capital letters. It's beautiful. You got to read this book. The relationship between these two men and their masculinity, it all felt right. To me, as a gay man, it all felt very... The observations were keen. It's a very meaningful book, and it certainly stayed with me, and I wept when it was over. When you want to feel a lot of things, read Giovanni's Room. 5 stars. Speaking of 5, number 5 was Crooked House by Agatha Christie. This is a standalone mystery novel by the Queen of Mystery, written in 1949. I originally saw a Netflix movie adaptation of this with Gillian Anderson, which was very good. I read this in August. Agatha Christie said, "Writing Crooked House was pure pleasure, and I feel justified in my belief that it is one of my best." I will cut that. Described by the Queen of Mystery herself as one of her favorites of her published work, Crooked House is a classic Agatha Christie thriller revolving around a devastating family mystery. The Leonides are one big happy family living in a sprawling ramshackle mansion. That is until the head of the household, Aristide, is murdered with a fatal barbiturate injection. Suspicion naturally falls on the old man's young widow, 50 years his junior, but the murderer has reckoned without the tenacity of Charles Hayward, fiancé of the late millionaire's granddaughter. Yeah, so I listened to this as an audiobook, finished it in late August, gave it 5 stars. It was read by Hugh Fraser, who is the king of Agatha Christie narrated audiobooks. He is such a great narrator. So this man is in love. Okay, and he plans to marry this young woman who is the daughter or granddaughter, of this well-known aristocrat from a big, wealthy family who was murdered. She doesn't talk about her family much. There are some areas where she's a little bit secretive. The young man who's going to marry her, his father works for Scotland Yard, and he kind of tags along with his father as he's going through the house and investigating things, having sort of like an inside track with his girlfriend slash fiance as they investigate the murder. There is a whole family of characters. Think Knives Out before Knives Out. It's a perfect mystery. The house is full of fascinating, funny, amusing, slightly crazy people. There's a deranged little girl in the story who reminds me so much of the little girl, Tootie, in the Judy Garland movie, holiday movie, which is fresh in my mind because we always watch it at Christmas, Meet Me in St. Louis, that little girl is obsessed with death. This little girl is kind of the same way. She wants to be a detective. She's cute and mischievous and sort of like a fun, crazy, unsavory little girl. And she's really fun to read. And you really don't know what to expect. You don't know who to suspect. Of the standalone Agatha Christie mysteries, this is my favorite so far. It's like the Siddiford mystery is maybe right after this one. I love the setting of the Siddiford mystery, being in the snow and everything. But this is just, the ending of this book gobsmacked me. It was awesome. The reveal is fantastic. So, new favorite Agatha. My new favorite Agatha Christie standalone mystery. So, that was number 5. Ooh, we're getting up there now. Number 4. My fourth favorite read of 2025 was, and you know, this is all pretty subjective, Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn Ward from 2011. I read this in July, and I gave it 5 stars. This won the National Book Award for Fiction in 2011, and I'm not surprised. A hurricane is building over the Gulf of Mexico, threatening the coastal town of Bois Sauvage, Mississippi, and Esh's father is growing concerned. A hard drinker, largely absent, he doesn't show concern for much else. Esh and her 3 brothers are stocking food, but there isn't much to save. Lately, Esh can't keep down what food she gets. She's 14 and pregnant. Her brother Skeeta is sneaking scraps for his prize pit bull's new litter, dying one by one in the dirt. Meanwhile, brothers Randall and Junior try to stake their claim in a family long on child's play and short on parenting. As the 12 days that make up this novel's framework yield to their dramatic conclusion, this unforgettable family, motherless children sacrificing for one another as they can, protecting and nurturing where love is scarce, pulls itself up to face another day. A big-hearted novel and a wrenching look at the lonesome, brutal, and restrictive realities of rural poverty. Salvage the Bones is muscled with poetry, revelatory and real, winner of the National Book Award. I started reading about the dog and her brother, and I almost started tearing up. You guys, I mean, okay, so it's right before Hurricane Katrina. And then you go through Hurricane Katrina with them towards the end, but up until then, it's just, oh my God, it's a difficult read. It's not pretty. I read, who was it that wrote? Oh, Cynthia Swanson, the author of The Glass Forest, which is a book that I read and really liked a few years ago, wrote on her review on Goodreads, which I'm sure was a 5-star review. She said, well written and poignant. This is not a book to read if you're looking for something light and cheery. The story is not a hopeful one, but it's realistic. I got a strong sense of place and culture. The writing is beautiful and solid. The descriptions lingered in my mind. I sympathized with Esh, her family, and those who supported her. So I read that the first time I was going to read this book, and it scared me off, so I didn't read the book. And then eventually I said, nope, I loved Sing Unburied Sing, and I'm going to read this other novel, which came first. And it's so beautiful, you guys. It scratches a completely different itch on my brain from what I normally read, which is horror and mystery. It's just literary fiction. And like I said, it's a difficult read. I mean, you're talking about poverty, dogfighting, the explicit rendering of a young woman discovering her sexuality and allowing herself to be taken advantage of and sort of degrading herself for the attention of men, boys that probably don't deserve her attention. It's honest and it's tender, but also ugly in the way that sex without love can be ugly. And the building of the tension as the hurricane season is ramping up, and as a historic Hurricane Katrina is barreling down on them, and they're not sure whether to take it seriously or not. Like the way it's kind of building in the background, and it's not the focus of the book at all. It's just like something that gets mentioned a couple times until suddenly it is the focus. Is so brilliant. People suffer in this story. It took me a couple of sittings when I was getting into this book to kind of figure out how to like gird my loins for the unprettiness of it. But then in the unprettiness of it, there's beauty. Like, it's so beautifully written. The characters are so lovely and dear that it becomes pretty through the grit and the ugliness and the unfortunate aspects of what these characters go through. Becomes beautiful. So it was scary to pick this book up, but once I finally did, I could not put it down. It was really satisfying, and reading about them going through the hurricane is some of the most visceral, cannot wait to turn the page reading I've had in a long time. Man, it was hard to get through. Not like I was putting it off and reading through it slowly. I just mean that it was painful. But some pain is worth it. Some pain is... It was beautiful. It was beautiful. I don't know what else to say. Jesmyn Ward, fantastic. This book is worth your energy, your time and your emotional energy to read. You won't forget it. It's so great. And that was number 4. And I guess it was number 4 because it was difficult. I guess I'm not a very brave reader. I don't have the stamina maybe to always read stuff like that. This list is subjective. It could be number 1 depending on how you look at it. So now number 3 and number 2. I have my number 3 and my number 2 are like really basically tied. I don't know which one comes first. They are King Sorrow by Joe Hill and Voice Like a Hyacinth by Mallory Pearson. 2 very different and very similar novels. They hit a lot of the same notes in very different ways. One of them is super long, one of them is not, but I really, really, really loved both of them. They're both 5-star reads. So I guess I'll talk about King Sorrow first. Okay, this one is really fresh in my mind. I just finished it recently in December. Arthur Oakes is a reader, a dreamer, and a student at Rackham College, Maine, renowned for its frosty winters, exceptional library, and beautiful buildings. But his idol and burgeoning romance with Gwen Underfoot is shattered when a local drug dealer and her partner corner him into one of the worst crimes he can imagine, stealing rare books from the college library. Trapped and desperate, Arthur turns to his closest friends for comfort and help. Together, they dream up a wild, fantastical scheme to free Arthur from the cruel trap in which he finds himself. Wealthy, irrepressible Colin Wren suggests using the unnerving Crane Journal, bound in the skin of its author, to summon a dragon to do their bidding. The others, brave, beautiful Allison Shiner, the battling twins Donna and Donovan McBride, and brainy, bold Gwen, don't hesitate to join Colin in an effort to smash reality and bring a creature of the impossible into our world. But there's nothing simple about dealing with dragons, and their pact to save Arthur becomes a terrifying bargain in which the 6 must choose a new sacrifice for King Sorrow every year, or become his next meal. God, Joe Hill, is one of my favorite authors now. What a fabulous time I had reading this book. This was like a 22-hour audiobook. Had a great time. It's an amazing trek through the decades with this cast of characters. You watch them age. I mean, it takes place over the course of many years. The characters are all unique and complement one another in really, really exciting, dynamic ways. My favorite character was Donna. She's an impossible person. She's insensitive. She's mean to people. She's angry. Angry and mad and blunt and harsh, and everything is black and white. But she's got reason for being that way. She went through horrible trauma when she was a little girl. She's a great character to read. She's infuriating, brilliant character. King Sorrow the dragon also was really, really fun. He's funny, he's sassy, menacing in his total disregard for human life and his desire for human suffering. The tongue-in-cheek names for Gwen and Arthur are very like peak, and Gwen being underfoot. Her whole coming from a family that has for generations worked for Colin Wren's family, like maintaining their historic home, being underfoot and being underlings and feeling less than. This book suggests that there is a magic in believing in something, and you can conjure something that you just made up and imagine that it is real, and if enough of you decide that it is real, you can bring it into existence. And that's kind of what they do here, based on an older experiment of this seance that happened a long time ago that they watched film footage of. It's hard to describe the way this book weaves together fantasy and reality, past and present, and the other side, like the long dark it's called, and our world. And the way people and objects interact and are kind of changeable and fluid, when you go into that weird liminal space between them is so cool to read. It is so weird. That whole thing is such a trippy concept, and the way it's executed is fascinating. This book is similar to me to Voice of a Hyacinth in that it is a friend group in a college sort of dealing with demonic forces for their own ends and, winding up regretting it. But just so different because it takes place over the much longer course of time and is much more epic in scale in terms of what happens and what they're doing. I listened to this audiobook and it's narrated primarily by Ari Fliakos, and I thought he did a fine job. There are multiple narrators though, and they come in very infrequently. Just like in background, you would hear like a character, someone is watching someone without them knowing it as they're doing something, and you hear the other person and like some sound effects. But most of the book is not that way, but then in like these specific moments, and it was consistent with how it was done, but in these moments you do hear those other sound effects and voices, and I found that jarring and distracting. It also meant that towards the end of the book, there was at least one character who you hear their voice from. It was like a female character, and you hear them being voiced by a female actress for the first time, when everyone has been voiced by Ari Fliakos up until that point, and like all of a sudden they're being voiced by someone else, and I really did not like that. And overall, I would say all of that extra stuff was unnecessary. A simple, straightforward audiobook production for me would have been better. But that's about the audiobook, not about the book. The audiobook gets 4 stars and the novel gets 5. I loved it and I want to read it with my eyes. I want to read it again. It's really, really great. So the other number 2 or number 3 is Voice Like a Hyacinth by Mallory Pearson, which is new, came out in 2025. I finished this in September and gave it 5 stars. 5 young women, eager for success, rely on the unspeakable to make their dreams come true in a chilling novel about martyrdom, ritual, and obsession by the author of We Ate the Dark. Art student Jo Kozak and her fellow classmates and best friends Caroline, Finch, Amrita, and Saz are one another's muses. So close that they have their own language and are so devoted to the craft that they'll do anything to keep their inspiration alive, even if it means naively resorting to the occult to unlock their creativity and to curse their esteemed, if notoriously creepy, professor. They soon learn the horrible price to be paid for such a transgressive ritual. In its violent aftermath, things are changing. Jo is feeling unnervingly haunted by something inexplicable. Their paintings, once prodigious and full of life, are growing dark and unhealthy, and their journey together as women, students, and artists is starting to crumble. To right the wrong they've done, these 5 desperate friends will take their obsession a step too far. When that happens, there may be no turning back. Yeah, so this is sapphic, it's witchy, it gives dark academia vibes. It's just delicious, and it's cold outside, and they're inside and they're painting all the time, and they're arguing, and there's will they, won't they, like lesbian relationship stuff going on, and like best friends hanging out, staying up too late and drinking, and it's cozy in the university vibes of it, and I love that part. And when Jo starts to be haunted after they do the thing, the like derangement and madness and confusion that starts to take her over is written in such a brilliant way. It's very subtle. It describes what's happening in such a way that the writing itself is as slightly off and unsettling as the experience feels to Jo. So it's meta and kind of gives you the same emotional journey that the character is going through as a reader. It's really, honestly, that her being haunted is really truly scary was to me at certain times. Also, this is a coming-of-age story in a university setting, which is a favorite trope of mine, a separate piece being one of my favorite books of all time. And it's also queer and dark and witchy, and I don't know how this book could have been any more perfectly coded for me. I had a wonderful time. Its reviews are mid. It's got like a 3.6 on Goodreads. For me, it was fantastic. It's, dark academia, university, cozy, queer, spooky, supernatural, demonic. Yes. Also, the thing is, I went to school for musical theater, and the way these women suffer as their art is being picked apart by their professor and they're trying to hone their craft and their skills and improve. and trying not to take it personally, but when it feels like it's just like a part of you, like you put yourself on the canvas, which is very much what it feels like when you're a performer, because of course it's your voice and your body and you're doing a scene and you're getting critiques on it and it feels personal and you have to work really hard to learn to not take it personally because you want to grow. And their experience of that process was just something that I related to on a very deep level. And the excitement of their life in school, learning to be better at the thing they love to do and doing it together, and that whole journey, all of that was very, very familiar and very cozy for me personally, which just added to my enjoyment of what maybe would have been a 4-star read and for me was a 5. And now it is time to discuss my favorite reading experience in 2025. And I feel a little bit silly and embarrassed about this because this is probably at least the second time that a Stephen King novel has been my favorite read of the year. So my number one favorite read of 2025 was The Stand by Stephen King. And I read the expanded version from 1990, which was like 1,400 pages, I think. And I binged it, which means I read it in 2 weeks, because that's a lot of book. But I filmed a binge reading vlog of this that I'm going to be working on getting out as soon as possible. But yeah, The Stand by Stephen King from 1978 and the expanded edition from 1990, which is what I read. I read it on my Kindle and on a mass market paperback, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It's hard to imagine not loving it. But I guess I can read the blurb. I mean, you probably know what it is, but I'm going to read it to you anyway. A patient escapes from a biological testing facility, unknowingly carrying a deadly weapon, a mutated strain of superflu that will wipe out 99% of the world's population within a few weeks. Those who remain are scared, bewildered, and in need of a leader. 2 emerge. Mother Abigail, the benevolent 108-year-old woman who urges them to build a peaceful community in Boulder, Colorado, and Randall Flagg, the nefarious, quote, dark man who delights in chaos and violence. As the dark man and the peaceful woman gather power, the survivors will have to choose between them and ultimately decide the fate of all humanity. This book, now that I've read it, having consumed so much other dystopian fictional literature and content in my life, just having read The Road by Cormac McCarthy, Bird Box, Moon of the Crusted Snow, all of the post-apocalyptic dystopian things, I started to realize how much of it was inspired by this book, which makes sense because it's a classic and I hadn't read it yet, but it was kind of amazing. There are whole characters from like The Walking Dead, looking at you, Eugene, who feel like they are gently excised directly from The Stand. This came first and it sets the bar. I mean, I know that there's like too much talk about Stephen King and he's not like the be-all end-all and he's not the only person who ever wrote a dystopian novel, so I don't mean to give him credit for everything, but it was amazing to read this, since it's so much older, and to recognize sorts of like kinds of characters and scenes and tropes of that genre here way back in 1978. It's been over 6 months since I read this, and I can still vividly picture several of the scenes in the book. People's final moments, big action things that happen, watching people slowly trek across the country, having these weird dreams that are causing them to want to head towards Colorado, and listening to those voices and going and like digging through cars that are stopped on the highway with dead bodies inside to get supplies and food and stuff. Like, it is just so engrossing and so major. It's such an epic novel. I loved some of the small characters that we get to know only for a few moments, especially in the expanded edition, because I'm sure a lot of this was cut. There are some chapters that reminded me of the Bible. You know how in the, like, some of the chapters of the Bible, if you've read, will just say who gave birth to who. It just like lists them. There are chapters in this book where it's not quite that dry, but it just goes through a list of characters in this town and tells you kind of a little bit about them, how they reacted to the beginning of the plague, and then how they died. And you kind of get to know them, and then they're dead. And then you learn the next person, and then you get to know them, and they die. And it's actually really, really, it's just so rich. There's this woman, this character that I loved, Rita Blakemore. She's like a wealthy middle-aged Manhattanite. I liked her. She was a really darling. I liked that character a lot. There was like a somebody who was like a paper boy on his route. And there's a lot of those characters that you meet, and then you either stick with them and they are in the story, but they kind of fade to the background, or maybe they die, or they go off somewhere else and, they're gone. But there's a lot of like those like single serving characters that you only get to know for an instant. And then there's some characters like Rita that are with you for a while, and all of them make an impression, and it just sort of fleshes out the world with this whole cast of characters that makes the world feel huge and just sort of like wraps you up in atmosphere and contributes to the enjoyment of the story. So I wouldn't want to cut a single page of the 1,400 pages. There are things that I've heard are not in the normal version that I'm like, what? That's crazy. That's so important, So I loved it. The whole world still lives in my brain. I'm also so completely amused by the idea that Las Vegas would become ground zero for evil. It's too dry there, you guys, so that makes sense to me. The depiction of this one character going through the arduous process, the physical ordeal of moving her parents' bodies to bury them in the yard it's gross, and it's dark, and it's kind of like upsetting, and it's hard to read, and yet that is what would happen. And someone has to bury the body, or it just lays there. She has to do it, and someone has to, and they're heavy, and it's hard to do, and it's awkward, and I know this is all gross, but like those details, it adds gravity to this fictional dystopia, and is an emotional entry point for a normal person to say, wow, this is what that would be like. Loved it. Yeah, and it's great. And it's great, too, that I loved it, because after swearing off dystopian fiction, because I really did not enjoy, and I'm sorry, I did not enjoy Blindness by José Saramago, and I did not like Bird Box by Josh Malerman, and I thought, I don't like dystopian fiction, but now I've read Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wabgisha Grice, which I loved, The Fireman by Joe Hill, and The Stand, and I loved all of them. So now I'm like, maybe I don't hate dystopian fiction after all. Which is a great discovery to make. Thank you, Stephen King. So those are my 10, I guess, favorite books of 2025 that I read. It was a great year of reading. I read a lot of cozy mysteries that I didn't talk about because they're just fun. I have a few honorable mentions, and I want to get through them really, really quickly before my battery dies. The Storm by Rachel Hawkins, which is about to come out next week. Really, really fun. The bombshell from the decades past that comes back into town to clear her name. The whole thing is really, really great. It's not special exactly. It's just a mystery thriller, but it just is a really, really solid one. I highly recommend that. It comes out on the 6th of January, tomorrow. 40 Acres by Dwayne Alexander Smith. There's a plantation for wealthy black men that is being tended to by white slaves. For the sheer nerve of its insane and thought-provoking plot, and for scaring me, because now I feel like that could happen. It was a good time. My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix from 2016, my first and only Grady Hendrix I've read so far, for the heartwarming backstory on the central friendship, and for pissing me off with all of the shitty parenting going on. And last but not least, of course, Murder by Cheesecake by Rachel Ekstrom Courage from 2025, which I gave 4 stars, which is a Golden Girls mystery, need I say more, because it was delightful and charming and so unexpected that I made an entire vlog about it. And that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I appreciate you being here and being patient with me. I know my content has been sporadic and a lot of it has been really kind of confusing because it's from years ago, and I appreciate you watching it anyway. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It makes a huge difference in the algorithm, and it tells people that my videos exist. And subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And last but not least, please do leave a comment below. Let me know what you're reading, what your favorite books last year were, what you think of the books that I mentioned on this list. I love to hear from you guys one way or the other. Happy New Year. Thank you for watching. And once again, until next time, I will be here in the dark reading. Cheers.